And now, the drum roll, please. It's such a good team here. It's my great pleasure to introduce Govan Rubin from Terry and the Cuz, who will be the MC for our awards ceremony. Govan.
Trigger warning. My first story involves reckless behavior and petty corruption. I was 18 years old. It was 2001. I was driving on a tolled road. I just got my learner's permit. And I was about 50 meters from the toll when my phone rang, and I picked up. It was my mom, and I said, "Look, I can't talk, I'm driving." And before I put it down, I saw these red and blue lights flash behind me, and like every Malaysian, I quickly pulled the car to the side and reached for my wallet. And inside, I only had 12 ringgit, which 10 ringgit note and two 1 ringgit notes. And it wasn't promising, so I thought I'd go with the charm offensive. So as the cop walked up and I wound down the glass, I said, "Officer, I'm really, really sorry. I know what you saw. I was on the phone. I was just picking up to say that I can't speak, and I'm really sorry. It won't happen again. I'm so sorry." And the officer looked at me and he said, "License." So I gave him my license. He looked at it and he said, "This is a learner's permit." I said, "Yes, officer, I know it's a learner's permit. I'm really sorry. You know if I fine you, you can't drive for another year, right?" I said, "Yes, officer, I know. I'm really sorry. You know, this is a $350 fine, mobile phone." I said, "Yes, I know. I'm really sorry. So what are we going to do about it?" And at this point, I pull out my wallet and I hand him the 12 ringgit, and I said, "Look, I know this is crazy, but this is all I have." And he said, 12 ringgit? I said, "Yeah, 12. I'm so sorry, officer. I'm a student. This is all I have. But you know this is a $350 fine." I said, "Yeah, I know. It's your learners." I said, "Yes, look, I know, but it's all I have." Then he looks at me and he goes, "Do you have coins?" And I said, "No, I don't have coins." And he said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes, I'm sure." And open your coin compartment. So I opened the coin compartment. There was nothing there. And then he said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." Jiggle your pocket. So at this point, I really just wanted to get the fine and never drive again, but I ended up jiggling my pockets and emptying it, and he noticed that there was indeed no coins. Then he looked at me and he said, "So you were not lying, you only have 12 ringgit?" And I said, "Yes." "How are you going to pay for the toll up ahead?" And I was like, "Oh." And he gave me back 2 ringgit. Ladies and gentlemen, people have the innate capability of always surprising us. Such is the beauty of our collective humanity. This year, it is ISPA's absolute honor to celebrate the humanity of one such artist. The Distinguished Artist Award is presented to artists who have made an outstanding contribution of talent, artistry, dedication, and service to the world of the performing arts. To introduce this year's winner, I'd like to invite David Bale, who will also be accepting the award on behalf of Uncle Jack Charles.
Thank you, Govan. We were so thrilled that Jack Charles agreed to accept this award. He is in Australia and unfortunately was not able to travel. You may recall in 2016, he performed an excerpt of his piece at the Melbourne Congress and just brought the house down. He's toured internationally through Canada, partly in the States, across South Asia, Australia, is a respected and loved elder, an artist, and is going strong at 85. So it's a real honor to accept the award on his behalf we'll be sure to get it to him. And thank you, Jack, wherever you are. Thank you.
Trigger warning. My second story contains supernatural themes. Between 1941 to 1945, the Japanese invaded Malaya. Their headquarters in Malaya was at the Victoria Institution School for Elite Boys, a school that I eventually went to 50 years later. Of course, there were lots of atrocities, and the school was known to be very haunted for the superstitious people of Kuala Lumpur, which there was quite a lot of them. So cut back to 1999, I now am the supreme leader of the first Kuala Lumpur Boy Scouts. And as part of our annual event, we have this thing called the annual campfire, where we present, it's the night of nights, it's the social event of the year if you're a scout, and we invite 80 troops from all over Kuala Lumpur to come to enjoy the festivities, talents, and our knotting skills. And what happens leading up to this campfire, we spend the whole month rehearsing all the little bits, and the night before the campfire, the entire troop, all 80 boys, stay over in school. We do like a big tech dress rehearsal, and we invite a lot of the former students and alumni to come and have a look, and then we have a bit of a feedback session, very much like what we do in our industry. Now, on that night, it was a great technical rehearsal, but being young 18-year-old seniors who left school, they wanted to have the feedback session in Bangsa, a very popular late-night drinking suburb. But being the troop leader, I had to get the feedback, so I followed them to this nightclub area. Only when I got there, I realized, because I'd been in school all day, I was still in my full school uniform. I mean, I had taken off my tie and name tag, but pretty much everything else intact. So we couldn't really go anywhere, and we ended up having the feedback session at the newly opened Burger King. As soon as that finished, they all went to drink, and I politely said I'll, take a taxi back. I had about 50 ringgit in my pocket, and double charge after midnight, it should have been okay. And I get out to the taxi rank, and the taxi rank is full. So I decided to be smart and walk about 800 meters down the road to a quiet corner where within 3 or 4 minutes, I waved a cab. Cab stops, I get in. It's an old Chinese uncle around 60. And he says, "Where you want to go?" And I said, "Victoria Institution." And he looks back, "The school." I said, "The school." And as he's driving, it's an eerily quiet cab ride. I notice he starts looking at the rearview mirror, and every time I catch him looking at me, he looks back. I see every time he changes his gear, his hands start to tremble. That's when I realized this old man had picked up a young schoolboy at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to go to the most haunted school in town. So I play along. As he's looking back, I start to put my name tag on. I pull out my tie, I do a full Windsor. And when he gets to the gates, and he stops about 50 meters away and the gates are open, he said, "Okay, you get down here." And I look at him through the mirror and I say, "Enter." And he said, "No, you please get down here." And I said, "Enter." And he said, please, don't harm me, please, you got no need to pay, please. And I got off the cab, I shut the door, he sped away, I didn't have to pay, and I walked straight into school. Ladies and gentlemen, we should be fearful, but we must not let it cripple us. The winner of our next award embodies a kind of fearlessness that has seen her blaze the trail in Chile and Latin America. The International Citation of Merit is presented for a unique lifetime achievement which has enriched the international performing arts. This award is sponsored by Ann Thomas Docina in tribute to Joe Golden. This year, it is ISPA's absolute honor to present this award to Carmen Romero. Here's a short video.
Queridas amigas, Queridos amigos de ISPA, gracias mil por este reconocimiento que aceptamos desde la Fundación Teatro 1000. Lo digo en plural porque este es un equipo que me tocó dirigir y que hoy día desde Chile les habla con la esperanza de que las artes sí puedan ser fundamentales en la vida de nuestro país y del mundo entero. Les mandamos un abrazo desde Chile, desde un nuevo país que estamos construyendo y donde esperamos que sí las artes, las culturas estén al centro de nuestra vida. Que la esperanza de las artes sea en realidad para todos y todas en este nuevo mundo que se nos abre. Gracias mil de nuevo a todos y cada uno de ustedes. Me hubiese encantado estar allí, pero estamos en medio del festival Santiago a 1000 aquí en Chile y no queda de otra que mandar este saludo. Pero de verdad es muy emocionante este reconocimiento internacional a nuestro trabajo, a nuestra labor en pro de las artes y las culturas, no solo de Chile, Latinoamérica y del mundo entero. Seguimos.
Congratulations, Carmen. And to accept this award on behalf of Carmen Romero, I'd like to welcome on stage Olga Garay English to accept the award. Trigger warning. My third and final story involves cultural appropriation. I grew up in Malaysia, where there are three major races: the Malays, the Chinese, and the Indians. Now, we all speak with a little bit of a twang with our accents, and I guess as a young kid, I was very comfortable in switching between these accents, depending who I was talking to. You know, I always figured that people understood you better when you kind of sounded like them. Not a problem being a young, good-looking kid in Malaysia, but, you know, bit of an issue when it's an Irish bar in Australia and you're a university student. So it's Bridie O'Reilly. I just got into the University of Melbourne. This bar was located at the corner of Sydney Road and Royal Parade, if any of you know Melbourne. I walk in there and, you know, I think it's policies for Irish bars in Australia to employ Irish backpackers to work behind the bar to help with the ambience. So I walk up and I say to the bartender, "Can I get a pint of Guinness?" He looks at me and he says, "Pint of Guinness?" I said, "Pint of Guinness." "What are you doing?" I said, "Pardon?" Like, "What are you doing?" I said, "What are you talking about? Are you mocking me?" "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are. You're mocking me." I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Why do you sound Irish?" And I knew whatever I said next was going to change the course of the evening, one way or another. So I looked at him and I said, "Because I am." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Look, mate, in 1948, after Gandhi was assassinated, a whole bunch of people moved from Delhi to Cork. So did my gran, and that's how my family lived in Ireland." I was like, "Really?" I said, "Really?" "Shit, I didn't know that." I said, "Yeah, well, now you know." "How much for the pint of Guinness?" "On the house, lad." "All right. Thank you very much." Ladies and gentlemen, when we have our backs against the wall, sometimes the best thing we can do is to trust our instincts. And if you had read the bio of the next award winner, you'd realize that this man is full of good instincts. The Patrick Hayes Award which is sponsored by Ann Thomas Dosina, is named after the founding president of ISPA, who was a change maker in our field. Inspired by his legacy, this award recognizes an ISPA member at any stage of their career who has demonstrated transformative leadership in the performing arts. To present this award, I would like to invite my favorite ISPA member from the Netherlands, Maria Hansen.
Thank you, Govin. And I want to say that the hugely unique moment is here that I am here and Anthony is here. So let's celebrate that. It is a huge privilege. It's a huge privilege to present this year's Patrick Hayes Award to Anthony. I am a little bit of a stand-in for Mary Lou, who had to go back to her home to theater for a crisis. But I do know that she's not the only one who nominated you. I did, and with me the entire Dutch membership of ISPA and many others. So there's lots of us standing here on stage together. The story of Anthony Sargent with ISPA is long and beautiful and colorful, and I think he's touched all of you in some way. Mine started, I think, maybe 22 years ago when we were at an ISPA event where we were practicing how to mentor. And to do this exercise, we got to turn to the person next to us, and for 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, I don't know if you remember, we got to mentor each other, and I happened to sit next to Anthony. This was maybe not quite by luck, because I had a little list of ISPA icons that I was trying to sit next to, and I recommend you do the same. So I sat next to Anthony, but I thought, oh my God, here I am sitting next to the legendary Anthony Sargent. What could I possibly do in this exercise? And so I posed my mentoring question. I had lots of those. And then Anthony said, Maria, please help me. I have this problem. And there we were in this conversation. I was flabbergasted, but it says everything about Anthony and his brand of leadership, which is transformational. I had the huge honor and privilege to serve with him on the board of ISPA, and he became our chair, and that was an incredible time for me of learning and finding out what that leadership is all about. He's transformed so many careers by hosting ISPA's pitch sessions for years and years, and now has again made such a change for us in this collaborative study that he presented today. He's been at the microphone at almost every ISPA session that I've ever been at, and it has been phenomenal to be part of that legendary journey with ISPA, together with Anthony. Now, there's one thing on my bucket list that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to check off, and that is to actually work with Anthony on his team, and because I know that that would be the ultimate experience. We've asked somebody who has had that experience, and please run the video now for this message for Anthony.
Good evening, ISPA colleagues, and in particular, good evening, Anthony. It would be lovely to be with you all tonight to celebrate this award. However, I'm here in the northeast of England with a little video message for you, Anthony. I had the privilege and pleasure of working alongside you for 14 years as we invented and realized the vision of the Sage Gateshead. And I can honestly say that that 14 years entirely transformed my whole understanding of leadership, not just in our sector in the arts, but in the world. You taught me so many things that have stayed with me and completely inform and illuminate all the work that I have done since then. I just want to name a couple of those things. You taught me how important it is to respect and honor everyone in a team, everyone from the catering staff right through to the conductors of the orchestras. You taught me that no one should ever be humiliated in their workplace, that everyone comes to work in the morning wanting to do their best. You taught me that the greatest adventures and inspirations come from bringing people together to create something collectively. You taught me that it is never the leader's place to dominate and always the leader's place to inspire and support. And you taught me that you always have to have your people's backs. I will never forget saying in a meeting, wouldn't it be great to hold a festival on both sides of the River Tyne to claim the riverbank for music when the Millennium Bridge was open? And you said, great, would you like to run that? And I said, I've never run a festival. It's not what I do. I do the community stuff. And you went, no, you can run that. And you stood right behind me throughout the entire process of creating an outdoor festival. And so I learned how to do that. I learned how to do that because you really stood at my back. I learned from you that leadership is never, ever about stopping people from realizing who they are. It's always about seeing how you maximize the people in your team and enabling them to become who they can be. And it's always about keeping your eye on humanity. You never, in all our years at the Sage Gateshead, you never made a decision that sacrificed anybody's well-being. You always looked at how you balanced the needs of our communities, the needs of our staff, the needs of the wider world. And you always saw the project of the Sage Gateshead as a tool for creating a better world. You never saw it as an end in itself. And that was and continues to be entirely inspirational. Anthony, I am so proud to have worked with you, to have learned with you, and even more proud to call you my dear, dear lifelong friend. Congratulations on this much deserved award.
Anthony, please.
I'm overcome I'm honored and proud to win this award beyond any words that I can say. But I'm also deeply touched. People who don't know her, Catherine Zesten is one of the most extraordinary human beings now in our industry. And that was the most touching presentation I could imagine. Patrick Hayes was founding chair of ISPA in 1948. He was an extraordinary man. He was passionate champion of human rights, of diversity, of justice, in an era, still an era of segregation in the United States. He was far ahead of his time on social issues. He believed that the arts were quite simply, the arts were for everyone in the community, that they were a source of inspiration and that they were a force for unification. He was fanatically, there's no other word, fanatically generous in sharing his knowledge and his experience. And he lived by a creed of just 4 words: everybody in, nobody out. And those were the 4 words from which 70 years ago ISPA was born. I've been proud and privileged to be an ISPA member for 32 years now, and I can quite honestly say it's been, for me, a completely transformative experience on my own life's journey. Its unique quality, I think, and unusual in our industry, is it's not a market for things, it's a market for ideas. It's given us all a precious network of colleagues all around the world who are all selflessly generous in sharing their experience, sharing their wisdom, and sharing themselves. And shared values means shared friends. It gives a real sense of a global family. Now, after all the madness of COVID in these last 2 years, we need more than ever that global network of shared wisdom, which ISPA represents. We need what I like to think of as a universe of friends, sharing our own wisdom and our experience with colleagues around the world and in turn drawing strength and courage from theirs. ISPA has never had a more potent and a more essential role to play in our world than it does now. Our own contribution, every single one of us, each of us, professionally and personally, for ISPA has never been more important than it is today. And the values by which Patrick Hayes launched ISPA those 70 years ago, everybody in, nobody out, have never been more essential than they are today. I can't begin to tell you how touched I am by this award. Thank you so much for the award, for your friendship, and for the fellowship that we've made of this organization. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very famous American politician once said, "There are the things we know, there are the things that we know we don't know, and then there are the things we don't know we don't know." The three stories I told you earlier have always guided me in my decisions. Never assume anything when it comes to people. Fear is inherent in all of us, but it's how we deal with it that ensures we continue to live. And when you have your back against the wall, go with your gut. Over the past 22 months, there's been much at play in the most uncertain of uncertain times. How do we grab new opportunity? I think the greatest obstacle to discovery and the finding of new opportunity is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. So, we know what we know, and we know what we don't know. But in this day and age, we'll all have to live and navigate in the what we don't know, we don't know. Congratulations to all the ISPA award recipients, and thank you to all the delegates, you who have braved the unknown to be here today. My name is Govin Rubin, and your journey into the unknown will continue at Las Santas Mexican Gastro Bar. I think it's around the corner, where more food, more drink, and more amazing conversations await. Be well, be safe, and behave. Thank you, ISPA. You've been a wonderful audience. You've had a great conference, and tell everybody who is not here it's their loss. Thank you very much, and thank you to ISPA and all the team. Thank you very much.